and welcome to another episode of Good for Profit. I'm your host, Mo, and this is the podcast where we speak with founders, entrepreneurs, investors, startup ecosystem leaders, you name it, who are working on businesses that are both good for the world and good for profits and for the shareholders at the same time, providing sustainable business model that will be able to power the startup to carry on for long term and continue to do good in the world. That's the idea here. Today's guest with us is Claudia Gwinnutt. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She is incredible, as are, to be honest, all the guests we've had here so far. She's currently the head of growth and brand at Milk and More. Milk and More provide refillable groceries and deliveries to your home. You should definitely check them out if you want to waste less packaging on the stuff that you order for your weekly and daily basis. Prior to that, she was the founder CEO at Circular, and Circular were again in the refill and package waste area. She was working with beauty products and helping people all over the country, all over the UK, but also working businesses to stop waste when it comes to beauty products, which are, there's a huge industry there and a lot of work that can be done there. And currently she's actually investor and advisor for a company that's following on the footsteps from Circular 2.0, let's say, but they're actually good, necessary good. And she's currently working with them as well and helping them on their journey there to do things better. Claudia's prior experience to that was working with Barclays Wealth and Investment Management. She was vice president COO there, and she has a wealth of experience with volunteering for different things. She was school governor as well at one point, and we spoke a lot about just her journey, going through starting a business, going through volunteering and trying different things, and what led her to where she is now. She was very open. She was vulnerable about the journey she went through with Circular and how they eventually had to close the business down for some personal reasons. And honestly, the conversation was just amazing. It was emotional at times. It was really funny at other times. And overall, so many takeaways from me, and I hope so many takeaways for you as well as listeners. So without further ado, here is the conversation with Claudia. Claudia, hello and welcome.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here.
I'm very excited to have you here as well. I sense a tiny bit of a twang in the accent. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I pick that up right?
Yeah, so I was actually born in South Africa, but my mum is Italian and my dad is British. And as a child, we moved around a lot. Yeah, 10 different schools.
Oh my God.
Lots of different homes.
Wow.
Yeah, but London is definitely home now. But yeah, there are a few words like "hya" and "aunt" for some reason that still have like a real South African twang.
Okay. So say gap year, please. Just
the gap year sounds very British.
Very, very British. That sounds incredible. Wow. So English parent, Italian parent, South African originally as well, and 10 different schools. That must have been a heck of a journey. Gosh, it's so interesting.
Yes. Yeah, really. I mean, I think there's always positives and negatives from it. Positives are...
Sorry.
Yeah, you can be really flexible and adaptable, and you must probably always have something to speak to someone about. But the negatives are like, I think all humans crave a home base, and it was quite hard to be on the move all the time.
I get it. I mean, it's not as bad on my side. So 3 different countries, 1, 2, 3, around 4 schools, 5 schools. So it's not definitely nowhere near as many. But I can relate to an extent, at least, like in terms of you make friends in one place and you get really close to these people and you love them and hopefully they love you back. And then suddenly, okay, yeah, we're moving now. We're going to a different place. And then you kind of go and start all over again. But I found that it's made me incredibly good at just meeting new people. Did you have a similar experience with that?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I think 100%. I think that's the biggest benefit, is that you can like find a way to connect with people because you've had to learn how to do it so many times. But I'm definitely in a place now where like I found that group.
That's beautiful.
And now I like really want to hold on to them.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Wow. Is the dog part of that equation, by the way, FYI for everyone, just before coming on, we were talking about the fact that there is a lovely dog in the background that we may or may not be introduced to later. So, stay tuned.
Yes. She's called Daphne, and she is definitely part of that group. Yeah, she's 5 months old.
Oh my God, that's adorable. Wow. Hyperactive puppy or not so much?
She's pretty chilled. She's a bit sassy, I would say. She unfortunately she broke her elbow a month ago, so
Gosh,
which wasn't the perfect timing. Yeah, it was a pretty awful accident. So she's been in recovery. She's got 2 weeks until she gets the all clear and she can like go back to like playing properly. But yeah, it's
I'm so
pretty
sorry to
scary,
hear.
like getting something to
Yeah.
look after and then actually injuring. Well, I wasn't involved,
Don't
but
blame yourself. Come
you're
on,
still
it's okay.
responsible.
Yeah, of course, but don't blame yourself. Dogs run around and they get injured sometimes. That's okay, right?
Yeah,
And
no,
I
I
guess
know.
it's just one of those things where you got something that you had to look after, and you literally had to look after her like properly straight away, chucked into the deep end, right?
Yeah,
No,
exactly. But she's on the road to recovery, so that's good.
that's amazing. I'm really happy to hear it. Well, hopefully you won't wake up Daphne. Hopefully she'll wake up naturally. But it would be great to get an introduction later if she does, if she wants to feature in today's episode.
Will do.
I would love that. So, Claudia, you have done quite a lot of things. Just kind of, if anyone checks out your LinkedIn or looks you up online somewhere, they will see that you've been involved in a bunch of different things. Right now, you're primarily involved, well, a few things, but you seem to be a little bit more involved with Milk and More now, which you can tell us more about later as well. But my understanding is a kind of bit of banking-ish background, and then decided I want to make the world a better place, and then kind of went on that journey, right? Can you maybe just tell us a little bit more about, first of all, kind of what that journey's been like, and then we can kind of maybe go through a timeline to where you are, what you're up to now, and just why you give a crap.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the journey has been a roller coaster. I think the one thing about whenever you make a change at whatever age in your life, it's just scary, right? And you kind of, I always think of it as like you're getting off the travelator that you're like of life that you're meant to be on, and then you're kind of getting off it at like a stop, and you're not sure where it goes. I don't know. For me, I think I think I did all the things that you were meant to do, like went to school, did well, went to university. And then when there was like no obvious next step around what you were meant to be doing, I think I just kind of fell into the bucket of like kind of doing what everyone else was doing, and like maybe not. I don't think the tools were around, so not to give away my age, but it's fine. But I went to university
Sure.
over 10 years ago.
Wow.
And at the time, there just wasn't really that much information. I don't think, or it definitely wasn't available to me around giving people like the introspection or to think about what they wanted to do. Like if you went to a career fair when I was at uni, it was like accountancy, consulting, law, banking. Startups were kind of like just coming on, but like it felt like it was still quite an American thing. Like that scene hadn't really arrived in London. And a lot of the time, if you wanted to do anything different, you ended up in like a kind of free internship, which is where I had been. And my parents had definitely been like, honey, like the minute you finish uni, you're on your own, which is definitely the right way forward. So I fell into banking, as you said, and I actually stayed there for a really long time. But yeah, as you rightly said, I had this epiphany moment where I was like, this is just not for me. Like, I'm just not interested. It's actually really funny to have even ended up in banking because I didn't even enjoy maths at school. Not that my job was maths, but like, it was quite, I think my parents could never really understand it. Like, I think when anyone asked for my childhood what I was doing and I said banking, they were like, huh?
That's interesting.
And then obviously went off to start my own thing. Went through a massive journey with that, which I'm sure we'll get into probably. And then I've kind of come out the other side with just a real clarity of like what I'm really, really passionate about. And I think that even if you don't have the job security or maybe you're not making you've taken a salary, step down or whatever. I think finding what you love in life and what you're passionate about is such a path to happiness. And that makes then everything else so much easier to navigate.
Wow. That is, well, you make it sound easy, if I'm being honest. Because a lot of people would love to find that thing they're really passionate about and find that path, but probably struggle a little bit to, that maybe they don't know where to start. Was it the moment for you when you decided to move on to something else and get more into whether it be volunteering or starting your own thing or whatever? was it like a, a real kind of hard stop of like, all right, this is it, I'm fed up, I'm done, I'm going to now go and do the next thing? Or was it more of kind of like a gradual, let me try this thing alongside my job, and then you realize, actually, I'm getting quite interested in that, and then kind of taking it from there?
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked that up, because I actually think whenever you hear these stories, it always sounds quite like a PR pitch. You know, like one day I was in the car and like, boom, this light bulb went on, and then like, I just started a company and now I've just IPO'd, and like, that is not real life. So yeah, it was definitely not that straightforward. I think I started to realize that I was just completely losing like my mojo in my old job. Like, I have nothing against what I did. I spent 9 years at Barclays. I did so many cool things. I learned so much. Like, it was an amazing opportunity. It just wasn't right for me.
Sure.
A bit like a relationship, right? Just weren't compatible. But my biggest problem was exactly that. I just didn't know what it was that else I would do. And I actually went and did a course, and the guys still exist. It's called Escape the City, and it's really focused on like...
Of course, I know these guys. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so they're really focused on like corporate millennials who've like literally did what I did, and that always makes you feel better, because you're like, oh, I'm not alone. And I think that removes some of the shame, because I actually did feel quite embarrassed that I'd spent 9 years doing something that I didn't love, because it felt so at odds with my personality and my values. So I did this course, and like, I can genuinely say, to me, it was life-changing. And I know that sounds really, really cheesy, but I spent about 3 months, and I'd go every like Tuesday and Saturday. There's a whole group of us, and they really let you unpick, a bit like therapy. It feels like work therapy.
Wow.
Why you made these decisions, accept them, and then enable you to explore. And the way that they really position it, and I've kept this, and I've actually talked about it a lot of times, because I like at schools and things like that, when people have asked me to come in to speak, and they have this concept which is chase your curiosities. And I think that's so much less daunting than like find your passion, like some kind of Instagram
100%,
what call it, like
that's really nice way to put it.
And I think with that, it makes it so much easier, because what they made us do was write down this map of like what they call a map of possibilities. It's like all things you're curious about, and like on my map there was literally like, I'm a massive planner, I love to plan an event, like, so there was wedding planning on there, and then events management, and then there was like, I'm really, really like I really wanted to see if maybe there was something in the tech world, and like starting an app. And I wrote down this whole map. And then what I actually ended up doing, and I realized this is incredibly privileged because not many people could do it, is that I took 6 months sabbatical from Barclays. And what I did was I took that map, and instead of like going to find myself in Bali, which I also wish I'd done, but I didn't do, I kind of went and explored and tried all those different things. So like, I planned someone's wedding.
That's incredible. But by the way, just more sidetrack here. It explains why you did so well at your job and why you were good at it, right? Like, I mean, if you're a planner deep down and you're pretty good with people, I feel like you'd kind of thrive in that environment. So,
thank you. So then and then it was through that that one of the buckets on there was around sustainability, and a lot of that had come from the time we were in. This is like 2019, like David Attenborough effect, Blue Planet, but also a reflection of my lifestyle. Like, working in a corporate office is really just drove like kind of overconsumption of everything. Like, you're having breakfast, lunch, dinner on the go. Like, you're constantly in an Uber, getting home from work late.
The crazy hours don't help, right?
The crazy hours don't help. And that's completely fine, because you need convenience, but convenience often in the modern world means waste, right? Yes. And I was feeling so like, detached from like who I was. And I think that's where the actual sustainability bit came from, was like, I wasn't happy with how I was living my life, but also I was becoming more educated on why those decisions were wrong. And I think that then formed the catalyst to be like, right, I think this is what I'm really interested in.
Wow. And it sounds to me like you discovered why the decisions were wrong because of kind of like a deep personal thing, and not just because of a sort of pragmatic, practical thing, if that makes sense. That's really awesome.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. No, go. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, that's really cool, because like Escape the City sounds like it really made a big difference for you. And so shout out to those guys and the work they're doing over there. And yeah, my understanding, as you said, is they're still around, right? So
No, yeah, they definitely, and they have like an amazing job board. But
Cool.
yeah, for anyone thinking of it, they do like I'm not an ad or sponsored by them.
Sure. Neither are we.
I love them.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I think they do like evening drop-in sessions as well, so you can get a flavor for it. But yeah, definitely, really, really helped me.
Wow. So you escaped the city. Went ahead and took a break and did some stuff. And it's funny that you did that back then. But by the way, you're not that old, FYI. I mean, that's not that long ago. It's fine. I'm saying that to make me feel better as well, by the way. But the journey that you went on, kind of like exploring, it's something that a lot of people around me, like my friends as well, back in London, for example, and a lot of just people have come across and had a chat with lately who are not in the entrepreneurship world, or who are maybe still working within, say, banking and finance or investment or whatever. They kind of are sort of toying around with those ideas in their minds, like, I kind of just want to go away for like 6 months. And then I've got other friends who've kind of done it a little bit differently, where they say, you know what, like somebody I know literally changed their career completely, got into a career where they can work fully digitally within sort of UX and UI. And go to Mexico for a bit and work from there, go to different parts of Europe for a bit and work from there. And the idea is that you get to explore different areas, meet different people, try different things, but also continue to work and develop your career in some way, which is so, because I know you mentioned earlier on kind of like the privilege of being able to take time off and just focus on that. I guess the other silver lining here as well is that there are ways that you could potentially do that without actually taking time off work. You can do it both ways. Maybe it's a little bit harder, but there are ways around it, right? Which is really awesome. So kind of don't don't think that you can't do it just because you may not be able to get a break from work. That you never know. So
yeah, 100%. Like I completely agree, completely agree with that. And I think anyone's journey to making a change, whether it's career change, starting a business, I think they're always all different. And I think if there was one right way to do it, we'd all be doing it, and startup rates, success rates would be a lot higher. And the whole point of it is the journeys are always really, really, different.
Absolutely. So definitely reflected on the startup side of things, definitely reflected in the way that, there are so many books out there and methodologies of how to start startups and what to look for and what to do. And if any one of those formula was absolutely perfect, then we would have millions and billions of successful startups, but we don't, right? Because there's always some form of originality to every journey. So that's beautiful. So going back then again, so the volunteering, and you got into a bit of volunteering, tried different things, and then decided, I'm fed up with the way that we're wasting a lot of stuff and consumerism and a lot of plastics around the world and whatnot, and decided to do something about it. Can you tell us a little bit more about Circular?
Yeah, I mean, so Circular was my baby, and in fairness, it still is. Yeah, so I can't remember the moment that I had like the idea for it, but I'd become really, really interested in like packaging waste, and particularly at the time plastic waste. And actually, the conversation has moved on from there about it just being, like this war on plastic. And actually it's around, single-use packaging in any form doesn't make sense. And I was really interested in it, became like obsessed with just reading everything about it. And one of the whole kind of, principles of, circularity is obviously reusing packaging. And one of the areas, like I've always been someone who's like been a bit of a beauty junkie. Like I will buy any cream if I think it's going to fix me. I'll put a face mask on and think it's going to solve all my problems. But I used to have a bathroom cabinet just like jammed packed full of pretty much single-use plastic bottles. And I think I really wish I could remember that was like, there was a moment that I thought, oh, wow, like, let me do something about that. But what actually happened was I started talking to, I kind of had this idea of like sustainability and beauty, and I'd seen a space in the market actually around trying to create my own product line of like super, super hyper, like sustainable beauty line. And I started getting in touch, which is what I'd always recommend when you're thinking of an idea, is like go and speak to as many people as possible. And like most people will open up and give you like 10 minutes of chat, a 10-minute chat. So I started reaching out to all these. Oh, sorry.
Can I dig a bit deeper into that? What kind of people?
Yeah. So like for me, for example, like I wanted to understand like what it meant to run a beauty brand. And then I came up with a list of beauty brands that I really liked. And like, obviously I wasn't going after like L'Oreal because, you know, someone in L'Oreal probably wasn't going to maybe speak to me, but there was like 5 or 10 like smallish beauty brands that were doing something with some angle on sustainability. And I literally just reached out to like maybe their marketing manager, sometimes the founder, would send a message, just be like, I'm really looking to learn a bit more. I've got a few general questions. I would always go prepared and kind of give an overview of what you're trying to ask for, because busy people don't like to give you like, would like to know what you're going to ask.
Right? Because of course, yeah.
And it was from that conversation that what everyone kept talking about was like, there's so many beauty brands, Claudia, you do not need to add another one into the mix. But the biggest problem we all can't fix is actually the packaging. And, you know, that's one of our biggest problems as we're trying to grow this sustainable brand. And everyone kept talking about like, I just wish there was a way that we could pick up the packaging from customers or they could return it. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm speaking to more and more beauty brands and more of them were saying the same thing. And that's kind of how the idea from Circular started, because I was like, okay, there's the need from the brands, like they're actually wanting this. And then there's obviously this growing consumer demand for less waste, and let's make Circular fit in the middle and try and fix this as a problem. And so that's how it was born.
That's super cool. How did you know, by the way, how did you know to go and start speaking with people? Like, did you learn that somewhere? Was it just intuition? Because a lot of people that's probably the thing they're most afraid of doing, in case one, somebody steals their idea, which I'd love to dive a bit more into. Two, in case, you know, they get shut down or people tell them that's a bad idea, don't do this kind of thing. Or three, just because they might, you know, get rejected and not even be able to get on a call, and maybe that might like be hurt them a little bit. So like, my question around this, like, first of all, how did you figure out that that's what you should do? And then how was that journey? And like, is there any tips for people out there that kind of looking to start their own thing?
Yeah, so I think actually going back to Escape, they prepped you for like also going to find the new things. And once you've figured it out, how do you go about it? And one of their greatest pieces of advice was that you need to go in, try what you want to do in the most simplest of forms. And that could literally be speaking to someone who does that job, maybe in a different industry, and like always test before you like, you know, hit the kind of exit button.
Dip one foot in at a time kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that makes it, and I think that makes it feel a lot safer for people, because actually the idea of like ejecting yourself out of one seat is pretty terrifying. I think the bit around people rejecting you, that is something you only get better with practice, unfortunately, and you just grow, you know, a thicker skin. It's definitely like intimidating, but ultimately, like, no one's really going to remember like your message. Like, you know, it's like if they don't reply, it's
just happen.
You know, I don't reply to lots of messages sometimes, and it's got nothing to do with the person. It could just be I'm extraordinarily busy. I like there's no, you know, I can't see anything that's going to happen. You know, there's lots of reasons why someone might not reply,
and I think
it's normally on them, not on you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the key thing you said there as well for people to realize if they're just starting on the journey is that, you know, you probably don't even remember who the people were, not in a bad way, but in the sense that like, even if you say something that you may think is going to be really bad or whatever, the reality is that the person you're reaching out to probably receives hundreds of messages on a regular basis. And, you know, even if you said something that's kind of weird and crazy, they probably won't associate it with you anyway. And so there's really nothing to fear there, right?
Yeah. And you'd made another point about something around, I'd really wanted to comment on it. I can't remember what it was now.
Knowing to reach out or people stealing your ideas.
Yeah, people stealing your ideas. I think that was it. I think this is always something when I started Circular, people were like, oh, you know, don't share. And I was like, why not? If I know the pain and the stress that it is causing me and the anxiety to quit my job and go and start something, the chances that someone else is going to hear this and be like, go through that themselves is so low.
Yeah.
I think it's quite different if you've like developed some really particular IP potentially, right? And you're like sharing your code with someone, obviously totally different. But when you're talking about an idea, genuinely the chances are someone is not going to nick it.
Yeah, it's very unlikely. And actually, that's a really good one to dive a little bit deeper into, because I remember going back sort of 8 to 10 years ago. I'm also a little bit old. It's that, and some people who are actually old hearing this may think, what the hell are these kids talking about? But anyway, going back sort of a little bit of time, I actually remember this being one of the fears that I had around, if I've got an idea and I'm thinking like this is really unique or whatever. And there's that fear of sharing it in case someone steals it from you or whatever. And the reality is that, even if there's somebody who's working on something around this, the chance of them actually stealing your idea and working on it, it's still low. Like, definitely don't go around shouting about your very unique thing to somebody who may be able to just develop it or do it right away. But at the same time, even if you do that, the likelihood of them actually doing something about it is still very low. Like, you've got to understand as well that there's a bigger element to this, right? Which is that, and maybe you can comment on this actually, because, given your background in investment as well, and given your background with sitting on different boards and so on, you'll probably have a lot of insight into this. That when you're a large organization and you're running, you're doing stuff, you may have capability to do things. However, you've got multiple revenue streams, you've got different priorities in different places. You've probably got a ton of ideas that you could potentially work on that you can't actually even prioritize or pick in between. But also, you can't always work on everything because it might eat into another revenue stream that you have. And that's another consideration that people should always think about, right?
So, yeah. And I think the other point for me with Circular was, like, I think when you start a business with a purpose that's trying to solve a problem, for me, when anyone ever used to send me, for example, like, oh, so-and-so's just done this, and like, it would be seen as like competition. To me, I was like, yes, another person on this journey. Like, the more of us there are, the more solutions. Like, consumers shop in so many different ways. I never saw it as competition. I was always like, great, that means I'm onto something, and like, there's more people, so I can talk less about what I'm doing because there's loads of us now talking about it and why it's important. So that's very different if it's just a purely, commercial
thing
you're doing. But I think when you're trying to make a difference or trying to solve a world problem, I think the more of you, the better.
Absolutely. And people come together more when it's a good for profit thing. And yes, we are going to coin that term eventually. When it's a good for profit thing, people definitely come together more. And people are more willing to collaborate and work with each other, I've found, at least from my limited experience. But yeah, so that must have been a really fun journey. But going into that world must have been quite, daunting in some sense. So do you have can you speak about around just the idea of going up against such a massive industry that probably doesn't want you to create refillable things, for being totally honest?
Yeah. And I also, I'd obviously had my 9 years at Barclays, and I'd done like kind of various strategy, products and operational roles, but I didn't know the beauty industry at all. I didn't know anything about packaging. Like, a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have known what like polypropylene was if you'd like hit me in the head with it. And so I'd never run a startup. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs or even had a big group of, some people are in like that kind of community, and it's like,
absolutely.
I didn't really have that network, if that makes sense. So it was really, really incredibly daunting. And also because a lot of people said to me, this is never, ever going to work. And okay, right, we've had to close it now, but it's taken on another life, and that journey continues. But
sure,
yeah, it was incredibly, different. Yeah.
No, but that's a different story. I think, and the reasons why people said it was never work probably were completely, had probably nothing to do with whatever the company's doing now. So yeah. But that's a really key point. I think, yeah, if you have, I suppose the thing here is like, if you have determination around something and there's a thing you want to see in the world and it's purpose driven in some way, kind of don't just take the negative stuff to heart. Figure out ways to make it work within whatever environment you're in, right? So
100%.
Once you finished with that, you continued volunteering in some way, shape, or form, right? I feel like volunteering is kind of like something that you've done throughout as well, the journey. What do you like about volunteering so much?
So I've done loads of different volunteering roles throughout my 20s. I think I did a lot of it when I was at Barclays because it it fed into that idea that what I was doing was so detached from, like, my job was so detached from like me and what I care about. So when I was at Barclays, I don't know how I came across this or who recommended it to me, but I joined the local governing body of a school near my old office, which was in Bethnal Green.
Nice.
And
Big
I
up
ended
East
up,
London, by the way.
yeah.
Get here.
And I ended up staying there for like 6 years, and then hilariously became like the chair of governors at like the age of 24, which I think for someone who, like, I obviously didn't have kids, and like my peers were obviously, you know, like 30 years older than me, was just an amazing experience.
But weren't you also pretty high up at Barclays at that point? I feel like there's just an overall theme in your career journey. So give yourself some credit.
Stop it. And then, yeah, I've just kept that up. I've just always kept that up. So I've worked at 2 other schools since then. By the way, I think every young person should be a governor at school. I think it's one of the best ways that you can give impact to your local community. You can take the skills from your day job. They're always desperate for people.
What's actually involved in that? What do you do as a governor?
I mean, you basically like have overall responsibility for like the management of the school. So like the school's finances, ensuring that the curriculum's being set, all their policies. You deal with all their complaints if there's any big issues at the school. So like if you're having to, if you're having to like kind of get rid of staff or stuff like that. So and I went through all of that because one of the schools I was involved in, I went through a massive change. So definitely learned a lot. But you also just get to be involved in supporting them and you basically like a board, like in a normal board, you're kind of providing governance to the school to make sure that it's being run appropriately, and effectively, more importantly. So yeah, really, really recommend.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, it also sounds like you get to deal with the bureaucratic side of things when working, I suppose, with charities or governments. And so that can be quite a good experience as well, right?
Really, really good. And I think you'll learn so much then take into, whatever you're doing kind of during the day. And then outside of that, yeah, I've had lots of different volunteer roles. I was like a buddy to an elderly gentleman. Loneliness in the UK is actually a huge issue, just due to like changing family structures. So it's actually an enormous amount of people who spend like 95% of their time alone.
Wow.
So yeah, I would just check in on him. I think it was like a Tuesday evening, like maybe do a bit of his shopping.
That's so nice.
Yeah, we had like a really beautiful bond. And then I've mentored some kids.
Sharing stories and whatnot.
Yeah, I've mentored some kids, worked in a homeless shelter. Yeah, I think to me, it's just like, I feel like when I'm not doing it, I feel sad. Like I genuinely, like it's something that, and I think charity work, sometimes there is an element of reciprocity, you're doing good, but it's actually also making you feel good. And I think, there's lots of stuff said about that.
I mean, look,
but to me, I think it's better to do than not do.
No, of course. And look, and the feeling good part, people shouldn't feel bad about that, in my opinion. I mean, look, you could take the very dark side of this and say that fundamentally speaking, I suppose we're all selfish. Right? Like you could go down that road and say that, like, at the end of the day, if you really dig down into it, you're doing stuff because you feel like that is the best thing to do. And there is some form of feedback you're getting back from the world to, like, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Like it's great, right? So doing stuff, even if you do something because it makes you feel good, you could look at it both ways, right? You could say, I'm doing good in the world and I feel good as a byproduct. Or I feel good and I'm doing good as a byproduct. But either way, still both things happen. So it's so good, right?
Yeah,
like there's no
100%. No, 100%.
But it's really cool. I guess the thing here though, I'd say is, time. It's how do you find the time? So I feel like this is something where the planner side of you must be pretty damn good at organization things and defining what to do when and spending your time wisely on stuff. And that might be a reason why you can also kind of find the time to do all those things. Because when I speak to somebody like you and I can see you doing a lot of different things, you're involved with, school governance, as well as volunteering, as well as starting your own company, as well as whatever. The first thought that comes to my mind is, how do you find time for anything?
Yeah. So I think organized helps. I think also I think I've got a lot better at doing a bit less and doing more well. I think I used to really suffer from like busy syndrome. And And I think I did ask myself some deep questions over the last couple of years around why I was doing certain things. Was it because, and I think we all get, as we get a bit older, we start to unpick these learned behaviors that we've got. And I started to ask myself these questions around, am I doing this because this is what I really want to do? Or am I doing it because, you know, I want to make my parents proud, or like, you know, some kind of glorified measure of success? And what does success look like to me? I think for a lot of it, a lot of the stuff I do is because I really am passionate about it and want to be doing it. But definitely as now, you know, when I was running Circular, for example, I definitely took a break on doing a lot of the volunteering work, because I think running a startup is a full-time job. You never get to, in the first few years at least, and anyone will say this, it's all consuming. You know, you can't just switch your phone off or close your laptop at the end of the day. Because also everything's an inspiration, right? Because you're like, oh, well, what's this brand doing? So it's like your body is just like a sponge absorbing stuff. So I definitely stopped a lot of that because I just couldn't do it, right? So I don't have any extra hours in the day than anyone else, but and I definitely get it wrong. Like I let down people sometimes. Like it's definitely not perfect. You know, I definitely get it wrong. But I have now got a lot better at being a lot more realistic and finding that balance. And I think that's just come with age and experience. I think when I was in my 20s, I think I would have driven myself to burnout quite a few times. And now I'm a lot more aware of that. And I'm like, okay, what can you realistically do? And also, what are all the other things that you need to be doing, like exercising and
the important things,
you know, just all the other kind of stuff. And finding that balance is really, really, you know, really, really difficult.
I try to.
It's a journey.
You're absolutely right. It's 100% a journey. I couldn't agree more. And it's also it's also one of those things where you kind of go through phases of busyness and less busy and so on. But yeah, starting a startup is absolutely, it's definitely a more than a full-time job. On that balance point, I don't know whether this is my way of justifying this to myself, or whether this is just kind of actually how I view things. And I'd love to welcome your thoughts on this as well. But I kind of view it less as a balance and more as a work-life continuum, which is not something that I've come up with. It's just something that I've come across at some point or another. Because the idea of a balance that I don't like, and I think I remember someone in a workshop speaking about this a long time ago. The idea of a balance is that you have something that you need to balance on a very single point, and it's quite hard to keep that thing balanced all the time. You're constantly like shifting back and shifting forward and whatever. And the idea of trying to do that, even just to think about, I'm trying to balance everything, it's almost like, to me, it feels a bit daunting to think about it that way. And I've started to think about it a little bit more as a continuum, where there is it's kind of a lot of things tie into a lot of things. You know, like I'll go to work with a friend and we'll spend the whole day working together, and we'll grab lunch and have a lovely catch up and then whatever. And then, you know, another friend, maybe we're going to go and play football or go and do yoga after work together. And so we work together and whatever. Like, I think like definitely work is something that's a big element of my life. And so I'm in a way tying a lot of things into it in some way, shape or form. So it's more of a continuous process, something that's helped me a lot.
Yeah.
But the other way that I've heard someone explain this that I thought was really interesting, but I'm not there yet in terms of, you know, like how sophisticated I am with this whole work-life balance thing, is that they view it as a mosaic in a way. It's like, you know, like the painted glass in a church, for example, except that you just have a lot of shapes that are different colors, and you have like a triangle and a hexagon and a square, whatever, like, and all of these different shapes and elements take different sizes and different forms in the overall thing we call life. And one of them may be family or kids, and one of them may be work, one of them may be whatever. And at different times throughout life, some of them get bigger and take a bit of a different shape and become a bit more demanding, and the others get a bit smaller. But then other times they shrink and the other things increase and so on. And I thought that's quite a nice and healthy way to kind of think about it as well. But
yeah, that's exactly how I think of it now. Okay. But I think of it as levers. So I think that there's like, I look at it as like, there's 5 levers of life, and some of them have different weightings, right? So there's kind of work, family, friends, your health, and then what I call life admin, right? So like
ladmin.
Yeah, you know, like just
sure.
the general being an adult, right, is number 5, right? Like, are you on top of adulting? And what I believe is that what I think of now is that, and what I remind myself of now is that, Claudia, you can have and do all those things, but you can't do all 5 at the same time. So you can't be the best daughter, the best friend, be absolutely killing it at your job, be going to the gym 5 days a week, and like, you know, making yourself, you know, meal prepping on a Sunday, which is what Instagram tells us that we need to be doing all the time. Like, you just can't. It's physically
That's
impossible.
all they do, these guys.
Yeah.
All they do is meal prep. That's why they can do it all the freaking time, guys. Like, come on.
Surely maybe it does give you like 50 hours back in your week, but I've tried it and it doesn't give me that much more time back.
Sure.
And it makes me lose like my favorite day of the week as well. So it's you know, it's a no. And I think that when you think of things like that, or whether it's the hex, you know, the kind of circle, the hexagon, I think that can give you a bit of reassurance, because if you check in with yourself and say to yourself, okay, actually right now I've got a lot of family stuff on, you know, maybe something's happened, you're planning a wedding or whatever. I've worked really, really busy. The chances are that you're going to be like also going to the gym and doing everything. It's just a no. You just can't. And I think that makes it a bit easier. That's how I process it. And I always check in, and I always know exactly where I am, or what lever I want to turn up or turn down.
That's a really cool way to think about it. Do you have are any of those levers that kind of consistently remain prioritized, or do you think that they're always going to be interchangeable in some way depending on what's happening in your life right now?
So for me, my family one is always at like 80, 90%. I'm extraordinarily close to my mum and dad. I mean, unfortunately, they don't live in the country. But yeah, any border family. My cousin's actually coming on must probably heading to the airport from South Africa now to come visit London. So the family one for me is a really hard one to switch off. Like if someone came knocking on my door who was a family member and they needed something, that would always get prioritized. Wow. I think work is always on, but I've definitely gone through phases of like really going for it and really not. So the ones that are probably the easiestly ones to get turned off is something like exercise and health. But I'm definitely getting better at that one I want that one to be consistent. I don't want it to be fully on and fully off. So I think that one needs to sit at around the 50, 60%. At the moment, it's an all in and all out thing. So that lever definitely needs some work.
Okay, interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, I totally get it, by the way. And within health, I have to ask, do you include sleep in that or not? And be honest.
Yeah, I'd say like overall health, right? Like, you know, when you're healthy, right? You're kind of like eating well, you're sleeping well,
exercising.
You know, you're exercising, like you're just, you know, looking after yourself, like skin and everything. You know, like there is a feeling of when you know you're like, I'm in prime health right now, compared to like the extreme of that, which is like you're not eating in, you're drinking too much, you know, you're not exercising, you're sleeping badly. You know, those are like probably the two extremes, and I think finding that middle balance is where I want to kind of get to.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, yeah, it can be quite a tough one. What I'm trying to do, so the reason why I was asking about the levers, by the way, is because I sat down and thought about this recently. I mean, I want to ask you what you do on a regular basis. And when I say regular, it could be yearly, every decade, whatever kind of micro you want to go with this. But one of the things that I do once every sort of couple of years or whatever is just to kind of go and take a retreat somewhere on my own in the wilderness in Scotland or something, and just to rethink and relook at everything. And I usually walk away having made a couple of really important decisions. And one of the things that I realized recently is around health. And I started viewing health as ultimately, this is the vehicle that I have in this world, right? And everything that I do, touch, feel, perceive, like any conscious thing I do in the world is through my body and literally my physical body. And so I kind of started to really appreciate that I need to take care of myself. Like I need to take care of my health, because if my health is for some reason or another not top notch, that means my work will suffer, my family might suffer, my friends suffer. Like, you know, all these things could potentially get affected by it. And so for me now, definitely easier said than done, but I try to very much keep health as like the number one thing. above everything else. And it can come across a bit selfish because, it's like, come and have breakfast with us. No, I'm going to go to the gym first and I'll meet you guys later kind of thing. But part of that is because if I don't do that, then I risk potentially, I don't know, not being my best self for some reason or another, and then everything else might get affected by it. Did you ever go through a journey where you went through something like this in the past? I'm just curious to know, like, maybe I'm going through this journey and people have been through the same thing before and then realized, mate, go the hell out. I don't know. So just curious.
No, I think I'm on that journey at the moment where I think exactly that. I've always not made it a priority because I've been like, oh, well, if I go to the gym, I'm going to be late for work and then I'm not going to be able to hit this deadline or whatever. And I think that's always been how I've approached it. And, definitely during when I was working on Circular, it completely fell off like my radar for like quite a while, time. And I would say that was like kind of just exercising, taking time out, going back to meditation, just having like time by yourself.
Yeah.
I was probably I was just constantly thinking about
Circular,
this, this company.
Yeah.
And I think a big learning, and I think when you process, that experience and kind of where I am now, like my biggest goal, if I was to say, is moving forward is apologies, how do I get that balance a lot better and how do I prioritize that? I think it does help when you get older. For me, I think I've definitely become, more aware of my health, as you have got older. But that for me is still a journey.
Sure.
And I'm definitely not there yet, but inspired by the way that you just positioned it. I think I'm going to try and mentally remember that I won't be able to do anything else if I'm not healthy or looking after myself. Yeah. Because your body is ultimately the thing that lets you do the other 4 levers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's what I'm kind of starting to see. When I first started thinking like that, my first thing began being, okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours in the gym every day kind of thing. Or like, I kind of started going a little bit extreme with it. But then what I'm realizing is actually rest is just as important. It's a part of being healthy. Going for a nice long walk is part of it as well. But also like, if you do have a really busy schedule, how do you optimize? How do you do things that achieve the outcome that you want ultimately, but maybe take a little bit less time if you're going to be really tight for time? Or if you haven't rested as well that night, maybe take it a little bit easier because actually you're going to be doing more damage than good. So it's kind of like trying to be a bit more wise with it, I suppose, and a bit more of a grown-up about it, and definitely comes with age, by the way.
So I do feel like really young people now are like on mega health trends that just didn't exist when I was young. Like when I see that people like don't go out drinking at uni, I'm like, what do you do?
Yeah. That's a very good question. It's an amazing
trend, but it just wasn't like that when I was younger. Yeah.
No, I know. It is incredible. I think maybe we took it a little bit too far with that. We did it a bit too much, but I almost feel like maybe try a bit. It can be quite fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's probably because, and I do think it's completely correlated to social media. I think if my life was going to be completely documented at uni, I most probably also would have wanted it to be documented slightly better, maybe.
So you think of it from that sense because they're kind of expected to be on social media all the time, and that's
and I think they're so much more aware of their appearance and other people's appearances. I don't know. That's just my hunch. I have no idea, but
potentially. I mean, that makes sense.
But I think social media's had a huge role to play in that.
It could also be because, like, they're kind of always trying to be perfect because everybody else seems perfect. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be perfect, then that means no drinking, no smoking, no doing whatever, and kind of just by myself. Which I mean is good to look after yourself. Don't get me wrong.
But it's also everyone's now got a camera in their phone. Like when I was at uni, we still had Blackberries. Mwah.
Oh God! Wow. Okay.
Do you remember the red light of like? If anyone had a Blackberry, you'll remember the like red flashing light. Like, which I think at one point I started like seeing it in my like.
In your dreams.
Dreams, yeah. But they didn't have cameras, or if they did, they were like shocking. Whereas nowadays, like someone could snap you in a second and post it online, and I think that just didn't exist. So I think that's why we were probably slightly more reckless.
It's definitely a lot easier to be memified now, right? Whereas back in the day, it was very that was. I never thought about the risk of becoming a meme until I was like maybe late 20s. So yeah, that's a really good point actually.
Yeah. Let's fingers crossed for both of us who don't become a meme.
No, I know. Tell me about it. I to be honest, I feel like, okay, I'm not going to say this one live, But, you know, I feel like I would make the most out of it and just be like, F it, mate. It is what it is, right? Take it or leave it, bro. But you know, I don't want to eat my own words later. So yeah. Uh, but yeah, can you imagine growing up and that being a real possibility? Like you'd be way less silly. I couldn't imagine living without being a little bit crazy. So, wow, interesting. Yeah. How did we get onto this?
I don't know.
Being fine. Back to the phones though. I remember getting the Sony Ericsson Cybershot. If anybody remembers what that? Yeah, exactly. Remember
Fancy.
That? Yeah. Tell me about it.
I was a Nokia 3310 gal.
Oh, excuse you. You had a weapon in your pocket the whole time. You've been arrested, mate. That's unacceptable. No, I remember getting the Sony Ericsson Cybershot and thinking this is the best camera that has ever existed, like in the history of anything. What was it, 1.3 megapixels or something? It was something ridiculous. I'm actually going to look this up because I'm genuinely curious. But I remember like all the photos would take with my phone because, you know, I had the Sony Ericsson Cybershot. It was
cool kid.
It was
not that cool.
No, it's not that cool. There it is, and I'm hoping that people actually know that it is the K800. I mean, it still looks pretty sexy. Come on, yeah, good stuff there. But let's find out how many megapixels this thing was, and okay, I'm gonna have to do it later and put it in the description of this episode. Anyways, back to more important things, just to celebrate. Back to more important things. So whilst finding all that balance and whilst trying to, like, you know, navigate through all of that, you decided to move on something else, and I take up a position with an awesome company called Milk and More. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about Milk and More, what you guys do, and then we can go into what you do there as well?
Yeah, sure. So when Circler, this was last summer, and Circler kind of closed, we could definitely talk about that as a journey.
We will do.
And I actually kind of felt a bit like I was back in that moment when I was at Barclays, where I was like, oh wow, what on earth am I going to do now? And I knew I wanted to stay in the space, and I knew I'd eventually find something. But, you know, there's one thing. I was also like 32, you know, like I'm a little bit older now. Well, I was 32 last year. And I was like, wow, okay.
Does that make you 45 now? Is that...
No. I'll let you guys do the maths. And I remember leaving and I was like, oh, I remember feeling a complete sense of failure and fear, like genuinely terrified. Wow. And I was so lucky. I put out a post on LinkedIn which talked about Circler closing, and I've always tried to be really open with the journey that I've been on and what I was kind of going through in as much detail as I wanted to share. And just so happened that someone at Milk and More saw it and was like, sent me a message, and they're like, do you want to have a coffee? Went to have a coffee, and she was just like, look, I can't promise you anything, but do you want to come and join for a couple of months? And so I did. And, you know, the journey there it's been so amazing. But in terms of your original question, was what does Milk and More do? Well, they are like the original milkman. So they're the largest milk. I don't really like to say milkman. It doesn't feel very modern anymore, right? Largest milk delivery.
Yeah, milk delivery, exactly.
Milk delivery supplier in the UK. But they obviously do a lot more than that. So they have like a whole range of like really, really gorgeous artisan products. But at the core of their proposition, very similar to Circler, is around refillable packaging, but not for beauty, but for grocery. So they have this 100-year heritage. They've been delivering and collecting milk bottles, you know, for 100 years. And they've now just kind of continued to expand that. And since I've joined, we've added kind of more and more products, you know, to that range. So last week we announced a really exciting partnership with Coca-Cola.
Cool.
So you can now have refillable Coke delivered to your door.
Wow.
Next week.
That's huge. Can we just pause for a moment? That's massive. That's absolutely massive. I remember going to Germany and always thinking, why the hell can't we recycle bottles the way that we do it in Germany, right? And I feel like that is a step toward that in the UK, finally.
Yeah, so incredible to work with a brand, you know, that big, you know, such a huge brand presence as well. And then from next week, we're massively, pretty much doubling the amount of products that are available in refillable packaging. And
Incredible.
I mean, I love the brand because what's always so funny is that one of Circler's slogans, or however I used to describe Circler, was like, we're like the milkman, but for beauty. And people would be like, oh, I get it. You deliver and you pick up in like a bottle. So there was something quite sweet. I don't know, that felt when I took the job there, that like, it felt like it was meant to be. And also, you know, they're a really traditional company, like traditional in like the good sense, you know, they've been around for a long time. And I think coming in, having gone and done a startup in this space just brings such a whole different perspective, you know, into the company. So, I've absolutely loved it, and I love them, and I think they're doing really cool stuff.
I can really imagine like what that would be like, exactly bringing that in, and I can tell how much you love it. By the way, just from your passion and how you speak about it, it literally sounds like the extension, essentially, of kind of what you were doing. I'm pretty sure I remember seeing the post, and I think we spoke very briefly at the time when you wrote about Circler, if I remember correctly. That must have been quite a tough journey. I mean, having to close something down that was a baby of yours, that's a really, really tough thing. I'm really happy that you are where you are now, of course, and I know that hindsight is always going to be 2020, but sometimes that hindsight can also be useful for other people. But also kind of like just, I think a lot of people might be able to relate to going through this, because the reality is that most startups don't make it. A lot of startups end up in kind of like zombie mode for many, many years, and then they keep going and going and going until eventually like, okay, we just have to, let's pull the plug now. I suppose at Circler, maybe the decision was done a little bit differently with you. But yeah, I mean, as much as you're happy to go into, I would love to explore that and kind of talk about it a bit.
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm more than happy to share the story. So, I mean, I started Circler in the end of 2019. And originally when I started, we had been focused on like building out like a B2B model, actually, rather than a B2C model, right? So we'd bizarrely done this like trial in an airport in Luton, which, that's a whole nother, I think that deserves a whole podcast on its own. That like 6 weeks of like working in an airport was just like, my mind was like opened. And then obviously everyone knows what happened at the beginning of 2020. So we were about to like kind of expand our B2B business. And we were starting to partner up with hotels. And then unfortunately, obviously the pandemic hit, I think Boris Johnson, I can't believe I've just mentioned his name on this podcast, but he went out on like the Friday or something like that to say the UK's going into lockdown. And on the Monday, we were due to start these pilots in hotels. And I had all this product right in my house. Completely. And you know, so then kind of did this pivot to B2C. You know, 2020, I think for all of us is just like, massive. I don't know whether we've all just blanked it out because it feels too traumatic still to talk about it. So kind of pivoted, and then pivoted into the model that Circler became, which is, you know, a B2C brand, working with loads of beauty brands and delivering products to your house and picking up the empties, right? So then at the end of 2020, I did an investment raise, and 2021 was just beautiful. Like it grew, we onboarded people.
How much did you grow in that year?
We went from like, I think like average basket size was like 20. It went up to like 70 to 80 pounds. Amazing. We sold over like 20,000 products.
Wow.
We were getting like
bigger, right?
Yeah, so it grew. Yeah. We got like an . Return rate, which is phenomenally high. That's within incredible. The refill space.
What's the like average normally?
So I mean, it depends by product, but like a lot of brands, like Luke did a trial with Tesco's, and their rate was like, I don't actually want to say something that might be incorrect, but it was a considerably lower, considerably lower, wow. Right? And you know, we won some awards, we got loads of press, and then came into 2022, and unfortunately, well, at the same time as running this company, I was also going through like a massive personal change. So I was married and I was getting divorced. And naively, and I don't want to put anyone off marriage because I still believe in it. And I am the biggest believer and lover of love. But unfortunately, the divorce started getting in the way of raising my next round. Divorces are incredibly expensive. There was no need for this divorce to be expensive. It just,
Wow.
I think you see the worst of people
When
you get
things like
divorced.
that happen. Oh
Yeah,
gosh,
happen.
I'm so sorry that you had to go through that.
No, it's okay. And unfortunately, we were due to raise, and then I got legal advice not to. And as anyone knows who's in the startup world, cash is king or queen in my case. And we basically ended up without cash. We were making money, but just not able to grow. And we had all these exciting things that we wanted to work on. And like, we had retail partnerships and like really big brands wanting to work with us. But all of that needed investment to be able to do, right? And I think as the months of 2020 went on, and I realized more and more that it wasn't going to happen, it just had this awful, painful decision. And I do really remember the day where I sat with myself. I was actually down by the river, and I was like, my team are completely losing motivation. We're about to run out of money in 6 weeks. You're just going to have to make the decision and walk in on Monday and say that we're closing down. And yeah, sorry, just thinking about now, like still
no,
kind of makes me want to cry.
That is I totally understand and empathize with that. That is a very difficult thing to go through. You make it sound easy just kind of talking about it like that when you say it in words, but the reality is that going through the fact that you have these people who rely on you, rely on the business, you've worked with them for so long, they're your team, you love them, you genuinely feel like, they're not family because it's work, but they're as close as, as healthily possible to that as a team, right? And just making that decision alone must have been so freaking difficult. Like even like weighing up these options alone.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's actually the hardest thing I've ever been through. And it's completely changed me. Like it has had a profound impact on me. And it was absolutely, it was heartbreaking. I loved letting your team down. I'll never forget walking in and having to tell the girls, that it was over. I think they knew it was coming, but I think I've just been fighting for so long to try and keep it together, and kept trying to think of ways to do more. And like, if we just grew the business by X, we would get X money, and then that would enable us to do that. And I was wrapped up in like knots. And actually it was my mum and my best friend who had like really honest conversations with me. And they were, I think they gave me the safe space to be like, you're not a failure, and there's no shame in saying that this is too much, because you're not like the same person, and you're like, this is like taking over your life, and ruining it. And like, we're here for you, and like, it's going to be okay. And sometimes that's all you need to hear. I think it's just someone being like, it's okay.
Absolutely.
It's going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And it was painful, just like telling investors. I was so embarrassed. I think it took me so long to send the email. Like I'm normally like not a procrastinator or like someone who buries their head in the sand, but like, I remember feeling physically sick at writing the email. Like, it's one of those ones where you write it and then you close your laptop and you're like, right, I need a bottle of rosé, and like 10 tequila shots. But not that that's what you should do in stress.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely not. But hey, come on, it's You mean that's not what you do on a regular basis and stuff?
Yeah.
I didn't realize. Right?
We're going back on the balance.
Isn't that why we work give free beer in the afternoon? I thought that was the whole point. Okay.
True. But yeah, I think when I look back on it now, it's nearly been a year, and I have such a different perspective on it, because ultimately it led me into something else. It's led me to continue doing what I'm doing. I am extraordinarily proud. And like, the thing is that I've never had anyone come up to me since it's ended, or even it said that I started a business and it closed, and people's reaction. And this is all I would want anyone to know who's going through this or might be going through this, is that no one's reaction ever to you will be to laugh at you or be like, yeah, you idiot. Because actually what people's view of is like, wow, you were so brave to start something. And like, any interview I've done since, it's the only thing that has been so interesting to them. Like 9 years of a career at Barclays, doing all this cool stuff. And they're like, Meh. They're like,
Exactly.
oh, wow, you started a business that says everything about who you are. Like just having the courage. And that is what I like hold really dear to me to kind of when I feel down about it.
You're really opening my eyes as well to stuff here, because, you know, like I'm just, when you were describing what was going on earlier, I was imagining if I had to go through that with our team right now at Q Finds, and how that would, you know, like if I had to have that conversation or I had to send that email to investors, like that seems like a really heavy task that to have to do. And one of the things that comes to mind is like, how am I going to justify it to myself, to others, like the guilt, you know, I like, if I'm imagining going through that, I would be thinking, you know, surely there's more I can do to not have to go through that, right? And so yeah, that must have been really tough for you to go through, just to even have to bear that. Were you a solo founder as well at the time, or
Yeah,
gosh,
solo founder. And I think that's why I mentioned like my family and my, you know, my best friend providing that space to say, like, you need to kind of stop, because I think because of my personality, like I'm really, really determined and like quite, you know, like I have an enormous amount of perseverance.
Yeah.
And but actually that can actually work to your detriment sometimes, because you know that's a skill that we all glorify, like, oh, look at this person, they just get, they keep going and they keep going. But actually the real skill is to know when to stop and to say, this isn't serving me and it's impacting me. And actually actually saying no is far harder actually than to sometimes keep going. And it was the first time I had done it, because in anything else in life, when I thought, you know, when I'd failed or something wasn't going my way or whatever, I've always been like, right, keep going. You just keep going, you know,
figure it
like,
out.
You're not very good at maths. Well, you're going to figure it out, kind of thing. And obviously sometimes you do need that. But I think in this case, because of the impact it was having on me personally, and then obviously it did start impacting everyone around me and the business, it was consuming me. It was definitely the right decision. But yeah, an extraordinarily painful one to go through.
I can imagine. I can absolutely imagine. In a way though, I might be jumping the gun here with this. I'd love to hear what you say around this more than anything. Was there a form of relief afterwards, that you've now given yourself the space that you need?
Yeah, no, 100%. I remember the day. So when you go out through the closure, we obviously still had, we decided it I told the team and they were just amazing. The girls that I had working for me were just outstanding humans. Like they were really young and just incredible.
I'm sure you were incredible with them too. Otherwise they wouldn't have stayed with you on that journey, right? So,
thank you. Well, I hope, yeah. And we obviously then went through this kind of wind down period, and we sold all of our products, and you then have all this equipment, because obviously we're quite an intense business.
There is
quite
a bit of hardware,
filling machinery, like you've got to empty this whole studio, this unit. But I remember the last day, one of the girls who worked for me, her name was Romilly, she was like our head of marketing, all of our marketing, and she was like, we needed to go and just do the final clear up and hand in the key. And she's like, do you want me to come? And I was like, no, I'm going to do it on my own. And I was literally clearing out this warehouse, like desperate to get our deposit back, like scrubbing the walls, trying to like paint over marks where we'd like made TikToks and like, I don't know, somehow like something had ended, some disaster had happened.
I love it. Hopefully one of those people are listening right now.
And I remember then like closing the door, and I had like this box, and it felt like a scene from a movie when like someone is like having a breakup or like, like leaving being fired. Yeah. And I remember I got out, and then my mum came to pick me up, and I just sighed this like extraordinary sigh of relief. And I just was like, it's finally over. And she was like, yeah. And I remember I slept for like 3 days straight. Like I was horizontal and I couldn't, and I remember because then I'd put out that post and I remember just being like, I cannot even, like I had so many people reaching out to me. And I remember I had like 3 days where I literally hibernated like at my mum and dad's house.
Yeah.
Just a zombie. I think I watched like a whole 5 seasons of like Beverly Hills Housewives and did nothing else.
Complete switch off.
Yeah, one extreme to the other.
Literally, yeah, completely. In all fairness, though, and kudos to you, like 3 days is not that long. Seriously, that is not.
I'm not a sad person. This is the thing.
I can tell.
I don't like being sad. So I remember my parents were like, "Oh, gosh, we don't know for 2 days.
Something really is up right now."
Going on. And then I kind of emerged, and they were like, "Oh, thank God!" Like we were really starting to worry about you. And I was like, "No, but you get over the kind of That's not to say that then you're healed or anything like that. It took a really long time to be able to speak about it, like I'm speaking about it with you, and like for months after, I really shut myself off from the world. So even though like I'd got a new job and I was picking myself back up. It has only really been, I genuinely would say in the last month that I feel completely back to be like attending events and putting myself out there again. And that's actually nearly a year, you know, well, not a year, but it's like 6-7 months of just, I really looked after me, if that made sense. Like I couldn't be, like I'd been so involved in this brand and been doing so much like sharing of it and online and talking about it constantly and going through all this stuff and being so busy with it. And then for 6 months, I kind of just wanted to be a bit of a nobody. Not that I am an anybody, but do you know what I mean? Like I wanted to retreat. Like I didn't want to be telling my story to anyone, if that made sense. Yeah. I wanted it to be around the people I knew to protect me, to like kind of feel better.
And also let yourself go through it first, right? I mean, that's also important. I think it's, sharing is such an awesome thing to do. Sharing is incredible. Sharing helps us in so many ways to get over things, right? At the same time, though, it's totally okay to give ourselves the time to go through things on our own first. Like, and if we don't want to share later, that's also okay.
Also
like, you know,
fine.
it's like there's no. I feel like it's really. I love that we're moving toward a space and a culture where we're open to everybody sharing with each other things. But at the same time, that should never be from a place of pressure to share, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's really beautiful that you gave yourself that time to kind of just go through stuff and let yourself look after yourself, right? And
I think that's what I needed. I needed to feel some sense of stability, you know, process some stuff. There were things I wanted that you couldn't do when you had a company because, you know, like
such as,
think about where it's going to, you know, like, you know, am I going to buy a house or, you know, where am I going to, you know, like, you know, really reconnect with friends. And I guess it goes back to those 5 levers. Work was still really important, but like I was obviously doing my job and spending a lot of time on it. But I had, compared to Circular, where I was, you know, every weekend I'd be in that manufacturing unit. Like if I went on holiday, I would still be working the whole time pretty much. Like I might not be sat in a traditional sense on my computer, but like you're still constantly doing. So when it ended, I wanted to explore what I should be doing with my life with all that free time. Right. You know, really reconnecting with friends, you know, doing something a bit more, like going away a bit more. That's how I got my dog.
Nice.
And I think that's all just was some things I needed to figure out and build back. And then I was like, okay. And sometimes you can wait until you're a bit more formed before you come out in the world, right? You need to come out when you're feeling good about yourself, kind of thing, or safe.
Sure, absolutely. Would you say that you feel like you're fully out, recovered now, or do you feel like there's still kind of a bit of a journey that you're going through with it?
No, I think I definitely would say in the last like 2 months, 2-3, since like March, end of March, I feel like it's like, I feel like I'm feeling really good. I'd say in the last month in particular, I feel I'm like, maybe it's something to do with the sun. I don't know, like the weather getting better.
I reckon a little bit of it.
Yeah, you know. But I think I've just felt this kind of like much more sense of control. But yeah, I don't, so, and that's why even now when I talk about circular ending or what happened, it feels like it's far enough in the distance and it's not so painful and so raw.
Absolutely.
But when it immediately happened, it was, like anything, it's a bit like a breakup, right? When you talk about it in the first month, you're like, oh, 6-7 months later, and you're like, okay, painful, but I'm here and I've survived. Yeah.
And then a couple of years down the line, you start laughing at everything.
Yeah. And you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what was going on there? Back to your point though about like knowing when to stop. One of my favorite things. One of the quotes or whatever. It's a prayer actually. It's the Serenity Prayer. Is one of my favorite kind of little chunks of wisdom ever. Like there's a lot of different chunks of wisdom that I love from a lot of different walks of life, and this is one of those ones. And it's like something along the lines of. God give me the this.
I think I've.
I think the strength to change the things that are within my control, the serenity to accept the things I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. But that concept is also, it's a very stoic thing as well, right? It's like a lot of stoicism is also about very much knowing what you can control and what is not within your control, and then deciding what to do accordingly. And that's really important. And so it kind of goes back to this whole thing, like knowing when to stop, knowing when to carry on and so on, like when to persevere, when to actually say, you know what, perseverance is not the thing here. It's actually just accepting this and being like, okay, it's time to move on. And that's a very difficult thing to do. I feel like that's so much harder, especially for people who are like hard workers and overachievers in some way, shape or form. That's such a difficult thing to do. It's just be like, yep, no, I'm going to stop and do something else now.
But I think for me, going through that experience, and that's what just is, having gone through that experience, that's how I've kind of got to the place I am now around knowing like that kind of like philosophy of like how you look at your life and how I look at my life. Because what that enabled me to do is like, okay, you stopped and it was fine. And I think it enables you to like forgive yourself. And that's the bit that you have to learn, is like the bit I had to learn was to kind of forgive myself for that and like let go of that shame. And I think that was probably the hardest thing to go through, because it was like, well, if I just done this and if I just did that, would that have made it better? And actually you have to get to a point where you can control your mind and say, that doesn't matter. It's happened. Yeah. And now you need to move on and like forgive yourself and remove the shame. And that learning that lesson has made it so much easier as I look forward into my life and the way that I want to live my life. That philosophy is just so important, whether it's forgive yourself that you're not hitting the gym 5 days a week and getting promoted and, being the best, friend and everything like that, because we all have a limited capacity, and and looking after yourself, as you rightly said, which I think is so critical to this, is actually one of the most important bits.
It really is. But even with that, for me, it's what I do 80% of the time around that, not what I do 100% of the time. Because again, like, this perfectionism thing, it's, in my experience, at least, unsustainable and can lead to a lot of just, feeling bad about yourself and shame and guilt and all that stuff. When in reality, you don't need to do it 100% of the time. If you're eating well 80% of the time, that's more than good enough. Right.
Yeah, 80-20.
80-20, precisely. Yeah, precisely. And the other 20%, well, let's not go there.
Not for a podcast.
Exactly. Another time, perhaps we'll dig deeper into that. Maybe at Luton Airport.
Yeah. No.
Do we want to go there, by the way, and learn more about that story at Luton Airport, or is that just? It sounds like you experienced some.
So wild.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So I basically, the circus started in like. So I this goes back to what we were talking about earlier around like how all businesses start differently, and there's no one path. It's not like you apply for investment or you do your pitch deck. Like I'd basically been at an event talking about the idea and was just really fortunate. And so much of a startup or any business is timing and luck. And that is an unfortunate thing we all have to accept.
Thank you for saying that, because that's a really important thing not enough people talk about.
Yeah. So much of it is timing and so much of it is luck. And I got lucky that at that event, there was an accelerator program that looked at sustainable businesses. And they came up to me and they were like, you know, not quite sure about this idea, but like, we think there's something there. Like, let's have this conversation. And that's when like kind of the circular B2B side started. And what originally we wanted to test was not a delivery service per se, but would it work better of like dropping off your empty packaging on the go? So like think of like, and there's now businesses that do this with like coffee cups and takeaways and things like that, which I think is incredible. And for some reason we thought we would do this. When I think about it now, I'm like, this is a very odd idea. But we sort of thought we'd do this with travel miniatures. Like there was actually an extraordinary amount of waste from like travel mini products.
Yeah, sure.
And they pretty much...
I mean, I can see the logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like people buy, like, I can't remember the stat. I mean, I used to know this picture by heart, but like, it's something like 200 million of these things are bought in the UK a year alone. Like we're talking large volumes of stuff. And the idea was that Circular had like a pop-up shop in Luton Airport. And by the way, I got in touch with Luton Airport, again, going back to that topic we're talking about of like reaching out to people, was like, I was messaging any kind of like corporate office, airport, somewhere where I could test this thing, like persistently on LinkedIn. Like I had this list of people and I was just like, and bizarrely, this woman from Luton Airport, amazing, her name was Liz, got back to me. She was like, oh, I actually think this is quite cool. We've actually got these like sustainability initiatives. And I don't really think any of us were thinking this through, but lo and behold, next thing I know, I am in Luton Airport. I rent out what can only be described as a shed to sleep in for 6 weeks. That was close to the airport.
No.
And I would wake up. For anyone who works in the airports, I have my greatest respect to you. Like you literally, wow. Because you have to go through that security process that we all go through, which is like the worst part of airport experience every single day.
No way. What?
They have a staff bit, right? So every day I'd have to wake up at 3. I'd have to be in the airport at 4 a.m. Set up my little pop-up, and like get all the products out again, and then stay there from 4 a.m. till about 7 p.m.
Wow.
And I did it continuously for 6 weeks.
Sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, like, oh my God, I just had so many hilarious stories. Like, we used to sell these toothpaste tabs, like, which is like, you know, a toothpaste that you chew.
Yeah.
And the amount of people that thought these things were Polo mints, and next second they would have like froth in their mouth, and I'd be like, it's toothpaste. Like, you wouldn't go to Boots and squirt it in your mouth. Like, what are you doing?
That's hilarious. Wow.
Yeah.
Drunk people at the airport, I presume, right? Getting a few drinks for their flight and thinking, let me brush my teeth. And then,
many lads on stag do's who actually were like the perfect customer, because they'd just be like, oh yeah, I'll get all of this stuff.
Okay.
But it was such an odd thing to do. And this is why I always go back to like it got attention, because it was like, what is this person trying to do? And actually it was from that I got into a hotel, because someone was catching their flight who managed loads of hotels and was like, you're in the wrong place. Hotels have a huge waste problem. Come, like, drop me an email.
Amazing.
And it was from that we then got into hotels, which obviously because of COVID didn't go ahead. But
that's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, you try this. That's really cool. Yeah,
and you learn, and like at the time I was just like, yeah, okay, you know, it goes back to like being a bit clueless.
Of course. And that naivety is actually quite cool. And I think trying a lot of random things like that is probably also helps create luck, right? Because you need to get a bit lucky, and doing random shit can actually help create the luck, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't advise doing 6 weeks in an airport though for anyone.
Well, no, I mean that sounds horrendous. I'm not gonna lie. That doesn't sound like fun at all. Were you? I hope you were like eating well and sleeping well and everything though, at least.
Yeah, I knew every single airport restaurant, and like if anyone knows, Luton Airport is not exactly. Luckily, there was like a kind of a coffee shop that did like kind of like healthy salads
as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
For a while, I literally thought. I remember like when I caught my first flight out of Luton, and I was like, am I going to have a meltdown walking through this airport?
Yeah. Remember the days.
Yeah. And I was like,
You're going to walk through and like see everyone that you knew again. And I was like, oh, hey, how's it going, Claudia? Welcome back. Wow. So when are you next visiting us for another 6 weeks? You were like, never.
I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh, that sounds fascinating. Yeah, I don't think I could imagine doing that. Yeah, getting up at 3 a.m. to go through airport security every freaking day. I mean, look, for the journey, for the experience, right? It's got to be done, and you believed in what you did, and so yeah, fair enough. You get to test a lot of random stuff now as well, though, which is probably very exciting for you, right? You mentioned earlier you bring that, the startup vibe into Milk and More, right? And so, and your role there, as I understand, is very much all about testing wacky ideas, right?
Yeah, so my role now is So my role now is like I have a very like long title, but yeah, I'm head of growth,
and Luton
then
Airport
brand.
Experiences.
Yeah, Luton Airport Experiences, tours of the airport.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's a good side hustle.
Oh wow, yeah, and you should do Milk and More there as well.
Yeah. Well, they do a B2B business.
Okay, cool.
And then and then their website as well. So cool. Yeah, it's really about like there's a lot of big projects that we're kind of all working on, but a lot of it is just to try and bring in like more creative thinking into, I think, I try to bring in some more creative thinking. We have a very, very small team. We have a very, very small team. We've just recently had a new CIO join, CCO, Chief Customer Officer, who has an enormous, amazing amount of experience. And I think he's like the perfect leader to take the business forward. But yeah, it's a really, really exciting place.
It does sound like it, yeah.
I think watch this space. I think in the next 6 months, definitely, it's going to look.
I mean, I feel like you're not able to share too much, and I totally understand. That's fine, but
it's different when it's not your brand, because I'm like, oh, are they?
Can I say this? Yeah, exactly. Am I allowed to speak about this right now? But I know what head of growth does. I've done the growth role in the past, and it's a very exciting role. And that's the reason why I was asking is because I understand there will be a lot of testing stuff and doing things around it and stuff and whatnot. So yeah, so I know it's a really fun role to have, and I can imagine why you'd be the perfect person for this, given that you ran a startup within this sort of similar area. You will bring a lot of incredible ideas into the business. So that must be quite a nice journey for you to go through at the moment.
Yeah,
and I want to know
overwhelming.
I want to know what your biggest thing that you're working on is, but I know you're not going to tell us.
I can't tell you. I think I'd get fired.
Yeah.
But it is also overwhelming because I actually haven't done this role before. There's one thing doing marketing for Circular, which was obviously like a lot of fun, and we did lots of like cool stuff. But this was, this is still slightly, it feels a bit more serious, if that makes sense. Milk and More delivers to like 300,000 customers a week. It's a big size business, and and I'm sure lots of people can relate to this. I, on a daily basis, am sat being like, I have no idea what these people are talking about, because it's still a large chunk that I just haven't, it's not like I've worked in marketing for like 13 years and now I've, got to this role. I've kind of like been, and I think that's why it's always really good to think when you do change your career that you're never starting at the bottom. You're just starting at like a different place, and going you've kind of just moved across and you're going on a different trajectory. So yeah, it has been, the last few months have been a steep learning curve, like learning, the whole way a whole marketing function works. And yeah, it's been a big experience, but I love it. And I love that I'm combining the sustainability refill element and then also like being more creative in my role. I feel like those two things are kind of perfect.
And I was just about to say, I feel like you're exactly the kind of person who'd love that steep learning, the craziness. I feel like you strike me as the kind of person who just love that so much. And actually, there is another thing as well. Like, it is definitely overwhelming, but at the same time, think of how many more experiments you can run and get data right away for.
Yeah.
Right. Because you have
and also I think bringing in a fresh perspective. Sorry to interrupt. I think bringing in a fresh perspective to a role is really good. I think sometimes when I always hire, I always try and not hire people who've just exactly done this before, unless you're really looking for like mighty technical experience. But I think if you're looking at roles that are slightly more strategic or need you to be like a leadership or management role, I think bringing in people from different industries who might just have the right energy and passion is a really, it can really work, right? Because if people are smart, they will learn what, you know, like they can pick things up in a couple of months and be like, oh, okay, I now get all of this, right?
100%. And I mean, look, to be honest with you, also, if you've started your own business and gotten it to a point where it was making revenue, which means you had some form of product market fit, and you grew that and you grew the business and you raised money in the past and so on, like you've been through a lot of stuff that definitely sets you up for being able to do this. So yeah, there's no doubt around that. I'm actually really excited for you because I look at that and I think, gosh, that means like you can, you know, if you're serving so many customers, like you can start making some changes and then kind of like releasing them. And it's like I'm always a little bit envious of being a growth manager at Facebook, for example, right? Or Meta, because like it's immediate. You can just right away take a couple of cohorts and do your stuff with them and kind of push things out, and immediately you see the results of the experiments you try, and it's so easy to do. And there's like, I can feel like there's a lot of reward that you can kind of get from that sort of thing. Whereas obviously in a startup environment, if you're still kind of growing, still small scale, and you're kind of like moving up or whatever, less customers and so on, and experiments probably mean a lot more. So like you have to be picky with time, resources, so on. It's just a little bit of a different kind of journey, right?
Yeah.
Would you ever go back and start a company again?
Oh, the $1 million question. So the kind of happy medium I found is I think the answer is yes. I think I definitely would. It's probably not right now.
Completely. Okay.
No, 100%. It's probably not right now. I think at the moment I am, and not shameful to admit, and I think this is a massive consideration when starting your own thing, is I'm quite enjoying like having a salary, being able to take holiday, enjoy my weekends again, and, you know, have to do other things outside of just what your job is. But the happy medium I found is I've stayed really, really connected to startups who are working in the refill space.
That's pretty cool.
And about 4 or 5 months ago, I was approached by someone who was starting a refill business. And we both like to call it Circular 2.0 because it's also in the beauty space and it's also doing refillable packaging. And me and this girl, she's absolutely incredible. And their company's called Necessary Goods. Really, really gorgeous brand. Really cool. And which we like kind of had some conversations, and I was always just so wanting to like give everything I'd learned to anyone who reached out, because I was like, no point me holding on to this knowledge. Like if you struggling with how to do reverse logistics, like this is how we did it, like maybe go and improve it, or like this was our packaging supplier, or this is how we did this on the website, or whatever. And she kind of reached out and I was like, basically like, you know, more than happy to kind of help. And then the relationship kind of grew. And then I think it was at the beginning of this year, she asked me to formally come on as an investor and like a kind of advisor. So I feel like I've still got my foot in the door, and I really love that because me and her catch up every now and then. And I can like, you know, we can like work things out together, or she can come to me with a problem that she needs helping. Or I can give her some advice based on my experience. And I still feel like I'm in that space, but I'm not completely in it.
Absolutely.
And I also really like it because I feel like I've gone into it with so much more empathy. But I think one of my first questions that I always ask her is like, are you okay? How are you doing? This is really stressful. Like this is time for you to be like, wow, I'm overworked and it's intense and I'm struggling. Mainly because of having gone through Circular and knowing just how intense it is. But yeah, no, they're doing some really cool stuff. I really feel like they've taken Circular, everything we learned from Circular, and they've managed to kind of bypass all of that learning and like get to like a really, really cool space. And they're doing, I definitely won't give it away, but like, yeah, she has some very cool stuff. Sure. She'd be a good person to get on. Like,
absolutely,
give her like 6 months time when it's, when they've got some stuff sorted. She's really, really smart woman, and it's amazing to work with her.
That's really cool. We'll be more than happy to have. I would love to have a conversation with her. And yeah, I think that's actually such a valuable thing to pass on that information, pass on that knowledge. to somebody else based on your learnings from a previous company, that's it's beautiful, because you do learn tons, right? And you try so many things, and yeah, you learn what works, what doesn't work, and you learn a lot of things the hard way. And so if you can help someone who's on a similar journey kind of with that, that's a beautiful thing. So you're definitely staying connected to the startup world. That's good. I'm glad that the startup world hasn't lost you to the corporate world forever. No, we haven't lost you to the dark side. And you're still actually doing stuff there. And yeah, I kind of wanted to ask you a bit more about, I know you mentioned sort of previously that you realized that there's more to life than just earning the good salary, doing the banking stuff. You felt good about giving back and so on. And obviously you picked beauty because it kind of naturally makes sense to you, right? But I would say, are there any other causes or any other areas where you feel like they're kind of quite close to you and close to your heart, where, I don't know, you might want to potentially do something around someday?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other one I would love to go into anything. I know this sounds so odd, and I don't really know anything about, like, I read a lot about it, but I've never worked in it. But I find like farming and vertical farming absolutely like so exciting. Yeah, fascinating. But I literally don't know anything about it. I'm also like not a tech person, and not a chemist or a biologist. I find that space really interesting. I think there's loads of cool stuff happening in the fashion world. I think the rental platforms, whether it's Her, Rotaro, loads of cool stuff happening in the fashion industry. I think the other bit that I think was probably most inclined to is to going into something around materials, and working on ways of like materials that are literally impossible to recycle, and that we know that we can't curbside recycle, and how do we keep them from going into landfill? Yeah, I would love to work in that space. And cool. I think there's a lot of cool businesses coming up, like building really cool stuff in that space. I think if I was to go for something else, and I'm absolutely loving my job at Milk and More, if I was to go for something else, I think that's where I would maybe try and move into. Because I think
that's really cool.
I'm quite interested in like a big machinery and that kind of, like, I'm not a very tech person. Like I could never go in.
Okay.
Don't think I could ever work for a tech company, but I do quite like the idea of working on something that's like a big unit. Because the bit I used to love at Circular was like figuring out the whole refill and return and the like equipment around that. That sounds so nerdy, but yeah.
It is a bit, but nerdy is cool. Nerdy is good. It does sound like a lot of fun. The hardware side of things, it's a much harder business to go. Excuse the pun, no pun intended. But it is a harder business to go into as hardware, because with software you can kind of develop something, put it out there, and get some feedback right away. But with hardware, it's obviously a little bit more complicated. There is upfront cost and so on.
Yeah.
What was that part of the journey like? Actually, starting something that required you to have material and stock and everything.
Just like a learning experience.
Yeah.
I mean, got so much wrong. I got a lot wrong, wasted money on certain things, but that, a lot of part of that is just part of the experience of it all. But a lot of online research, speaking to people. Because we basically did all the filling of the products in our warehouse. Just read it. I just remember like speaking to like calling up these kind of, you have these like filling machines and like trying to call up these companies, and they'd just be like,
what do you want about me?
Well, how does it work?
Exactly.
Like, what are you doing? But the thing that's so amazing is that when I started Circular and I talked about the idea of like, reusable packaging and these ways, and when I first started approaching brands to come on board because we didn't make the product, people were like, what are you on about? Like, you had to really, it was a really hard sell.
Yeah.
Whereas when you talk about that, what's amazing is that in the 3-4 years, that industry has come on leaps and bounds. And there's so many incredible companies, whether it's Dizzy, Able and Cole have just launched with refillable groceries. I mean, there's so much that concept is really well known now.
And it's about time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's about time. And it's thanks to people like you, by the way, that kind of help put it on the scene, actually, to begin with. No, genuinely, it makes a big difference. Thanks for taking a punch for us. But speaking to like the hardware thing, so you don't necessarily have to go too much into specifically the refillable side of the business, but obviously there was a hardware element to your business. It wasn't just software, you know, there was element, you literally had to have a unit and everything else. Just thinking back to that, you know, and thinking about the mistakes that you made, if there's somebody out there right now listening and they want to start a business that has some form of hardware in it, and they know they need to have maybe upfront cost or whatever, like, is there a shortcut? Is there something that they can do to start testing this thing without having to invest so much upfront? Or is it just inevitable?
There's sometimes where it's just inevitable, but what we did as a mistake was we tried to build the full system. Well, when I say we, because at the time it was still just me, I tried to build the whole system.
Okay.
Right. So like, you know, had websites, had the, you know, the brands on board, the delivery, the collection. How am I going to clean these bottles? How am I going to wash them? Without actually realizing that I could have collected about 1,000 bottles before I needed to go and wash them. And I actually could have not even worried about washing them and then refilling them. I could have worried about a much later time. And instead, what I should have done is like, what's the bit that I need to do now? And what can I actually worry about later?
You scaled too fast in a way within the hardware. Okay.
Yeah. And that is, I think, a really, really big learning. And I think it also came from was that a lot of people were asking the questions like, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? And going back to someone being like, I'm going to figure it out later is not really the right response.
Yeah,
but I think what I did is I went too far to figure it out in the sense of like pressing the button to making it work. Was what I should have done is like, right, I really need to understand how I'm going to sell this. How am I going to market it? How am I going to change these customers' behaviors? And really focused on that. And I had a good understanding of the ecosystem I needed to build, but not go and build all of it. And what I did was like, I found the ecosystem and then I started to build it. And then by the time I needed it, it wasn't relevant anymore because the business had changed and we had to restart. And that's really difficult, right? Because I think that, I don't know if someone would have done it differently, but to me, that came with it. That was just a lesson learned. And there wasn't anyone telling me to do it differently and I was going against them. It was just generally a lesson of life.
But that actually is a lesson that many startups get wrong. And I've definitely made that mistake in the past where you want to offer something and you think of what is the big grand overall thing that I want to offer. And then you're like, okay, cool, let's go make it happen. And you go and try and make the whole thing happen when actually it's a bit of a subtle thing where you think, okay, which element of what I'm doing is the biggest issue right now that I'm trying to tackle first, right? And then going into that, just that. It's like being purely focused on that. But you kind of need the understanding, like you mentioned, of the ecosystem, of the journey, of the kind of the whole, like the what customers do before and after they come to you kind of thing. But you're right in that, like, you don't need the whole thing to be built. You just need that one little element, fix that, sort that out, and then begin testing. It's like, what do I need right now to actually start testing a value proposition straight away? And that's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's such a hard thing to do. But I feel like the more you get it wrong, the more you become better at doing that, of just focusing on
I think it also comes down to your personality, because I think can be quite a perfectionist and therefore it felt foreign to me at the time. Because I think it's in everything else that you get taught, get something completely finished and, things, need to be,
you have to get 100 out of 100 on your exam.
Yeah.
And whatnot.
Yeah. And I actually think with the startup, when you're running a startup, you kind of need to think, okay, well, actually this is 60% there. It could be better, but like, does it do the job? Yeah. Let's get it out. And, and this is quite a known thing now, but at the time, I think there's one thing of knowing that phrase. Precisely. And then there's another thing of putting it into practice. And that's the hard thing, because I definitely knew that and was reading that in all startup books, but for some reason it wasn't computing. And I was like, oh yeah, but my packaging is going to be different and the washing machine will be different. The bit I wasn't realizing was that actually the bit that did, it was layered.
It really is interesting. And actually on that point, it's weird. I don't know how to describe this, but I've kind of been thinking about this more and more lately, where you have these incredible people out there who give advice on incredible things. And when you listen to it, it makes sense, it's logical, whatever. You think, okay, yeah, that makes sense, I should go and do the thing. But one thing that I've come to realize lately is that any piece of advice that exists out there should always be taken with the context of that person in mind. How far ahead of me are they right now? So like, if Jeff Bezos goes and says you should do this thing that way, or whoever you might look up to in whatever area of life, whether you like them or don't like them, whether you would learn from them, not whatever it is, think of like where they are right now and realize that they have success bias. If they're successful, they have success bias. They also are, we all have a fallacy in the sense that we remember the things that are most recent more so than remember what happened before that. And the other things that when people speak now, they generally speak from their perspective now more so than from the past. And so, what people are doing now, like for example, and this is something around the work-life balance thing. I'm by the way, I'm all for people doing what the hell they want to do. Like I don't judge. You do what you want. You want to work 20,000 hours, do it. I don't care. Like, it's your thing, right?
Yeah.
You want to have work 2 hours, also up to you. Do your own thing. Whatever makes you happy, right? But the thing, for example, like when you hear a lot of leaders talk about, oh yeah, I only work 4 days a week and I exercise every day and I sleep 8 hours a night and I see my family and friends and I make sure I have no meetings in the morning so I can focus on blah, blah, blah. And yeah, and they're a successful, tech entrepreneur. I'm like, was that how you built the startup at the start though? Because I highly freaking doubt it, right? And so it's like, when we're taking advice from people, we should always think, well, context in mind, okay? And I feel like the reason why I'm saying all this, because going back to, all these startup books that mention, well, you got to make sure that you do what is absolutely required to do whatever. These guys probably made the exact same mistakes that everybody else is making, and they learned the hard way what they need to do. Then they put it into words and they put it into books. But I feel like sometimes it's quite hard to then take that and literally apply it, because in a way every situation is a little bit novel in some way, shape, or form, and applying it there is going to be a little bit different. So the reason I'm trying to say this whole rant is basically just around taking it with the context in mind, in that, like, in some cases, going through and learning the hard way is not, it's just going to have to happen sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, definitely. And, I'm sure, I think that's, I'm sure my mum was like, oh, I've told you all these things a million times and you still went and did them, but you've got to learn your own lessons, right?
Lessons, yeah. Obviously you learn from other people's mistakes and success as well, but absolutely. Like, but yeah, definitely take it in that sense. Are we going to see the dog today, or
shall I wake her up?
No, it's okay. I mean, if she's...
No, I can't believe she slept for like all this time, but
I love it.
Come here. Oh, big stretch. Oh, here she is. The absolute love of my life.
Oh my God. Hello. Hey. She's a bit cranky, right? Just woke up.
Yeah, she's like,
why are you waking me up right now?
I'm not ready for the camera.
Yeah. Hi. Hello. Hi.
Hello.
Oh, she just wants a kiss.
Oh. She's my angel.
How's she feeling, by the way? Is she
she's
getting
good.
better?
Her scar is like really healed.
That's really good.
She's good. She is a little trooper.
Oh, bless her.
She just wants to go back to bed.
Yeah. Put her back. Thanks. Lovely to meet you. What's her name, by the way? Rafaela, is that right?
Daphne.
Sorry, I have no idea.
Rafaela would have been a good name.
I don't know where I got that from, but hey, yeah. Daphne, there's an F in there somewhere. There's an F and an A or somewhere, right? So there you go. It's a PH, but it doesn't matter. Claudia, I don't want to make you late for your next thing. I know that you have a very important thing coming up. I want to genuinely thank you for coming. I had such a good conversation together. Thank you for opening up about the journey you've been through. I'm sure that that's going to be really valuable for people listening, and it was very valuable for me as well. One final thing, two final things actually before I let you go. One of them is, if you had any, if somebody else wants to start something out there, for example, do you have any advice for them that you would give, kind of thinking back through your own journey, and also if somebody's changing their career?
Just go for it. Okay. Not just go for it. Actually, I take that back. I think go and find the easiest and cheapest way. And I know that sounds easier said than done, to go and test or explore whether that's just an idea because you're romanticizing it, which I think a lot of us do, or whether you'd actually like it, and find that smallest way to try and that literally could just be a conversation with someone, I remember a friend of mine who wanted to go and be like, she'd always romanticized about this idea of being a florist. And then like, I was like, just go on a floristry course. Like she used to be obsessed. And then she went and she was like, yeah, no, that's just not for me.
I don't like it.
I mean, that's a really easy way to describe it. But go and find a way to try and get some experience or speak to someone to see and explore. Exactly comes back to that kind of explore that possibility and be okay with knowing that that might not be the thing, and know that there's like multitudes of us and there's actually lots of different things that we could end up being really passionate about, and that can change over our lifetime, and give yourself that comfort. I think the second little bit of advice is be really prepared for how hard it is. And that sounds quite negative, but I think we've really got into a bad place of over glamorizing like still like startup life, and the reality of it is that it is really, really tough. And still that makes it sound sexy because people are like, oh yeah, that's a bit of me and I fancy that. But it is emotionally takes a toll on you. And I really, really applaud anyone who does it, whether it works or not, because it's extraordinarily brave. So yeah, just make sure you've thought about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Is there anything that you're working on right now that you're super excited about other than what you've already mentioned? So Milk and More, Necessary Goods. Is there anything else that you want to quickly mention here?
No, I think that's it. I think the next thing that is on my next big dream, which is so random, is like I have a very, very like hyper imagination, and I've become obsessed with the idea of writing a children's book.
That's so cool. Okay, wow, I love it.
So I have this like small story in my mind about what it would be, but like I'm dyslexic, so the idea of writing a book sounds hilarious. But
no, that's actually brilliant. I was supposed to have an episode this week with a person who was dyslexic, and he was told, I don't want to give up the story, but don't tell the story. He's gone ahead and done some incredible things completely in the face of that, and honestly, so yeah, let that never be a barrier for writing.
Yeah,
I'm going to say
so yeah, I feel like nowadays you can just put anything on Amazon, so I'm like, well, maybe I'll just put it out there.
Why not? Absolutely, why not? Go for it. And you never know, right? Like you said,
yeah,
try it. See, maybe
I'll put it under like a pseudonym so no one knows it's me.
Oh gosh, we've got a Harry Potter coming here, guys. It's
No,
I know.
We're talking children books with like 2 lines.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, cool. They're fun. Yeah, I can see the hyper imagination working there. Have you ever watched that episode of Black Books where they sit down and try to write a children's book?
No, but I think I need to watch that.
You know what Black Books is, or are you too young for that? Oh, god damn.
Come on. We must be the sisters.
Okay, go check out Black Books and check out the episode where they try to write a children's book. It's brilliant. Okay. Anyway, Claudia, thank you so much for coming. Pleasure speaking with you. I hope that we'll get the chance to have a chat again soon after you've had incredible success with Milk and More and everything else. Yeah, I wish you the very best of luck with it all, and welcome out of the startup life and into the corporate world, but soon we'll welcome you back into the startup.
Thank you so much. Yeah,
thank you.
Pleasure.
Enjoy your evening. See you soon. Bye. We hope that you liked the episode. This podcast was sponsored by QFind, a hiring platform that matches candidates with jobs and employers based on many factors that ensure longer-term alignment. It goes way beyond package and salaries and take into account much, much more than that to ensure a happy working environment for everybody. To find out more about this podcast and to see further releases, we'll be announcing them at the @qfinds.io Instagram page, as well as on the qfinds.io website, as well as from my own personal Instagram page and my own personal LinkedIn. All information you need that we spoke about in the podcast or this information mentioned here will be mentioned below in the description. So take a look, visit those links, and if you like anything or want to get in touch, please do. And lastly, stay tuned for more. Have an amazing week ahead of you.